Welcome to Follow Me to the MROP, a podcast dedicated to the journey of the masculine soul and the transformative power of initiation. My name is Brian Mueller. I live in suburban Dayton, Ohio, and I made my rites at Pilgrim Park in Illinois in 2014. I'm your host, and in most episodes, I sit down with one man who has made his rites, and I invite him to share his story. But for this episode, we're doing something different. I'm sharing a podcast produced and hosted by my friend Jeff King called 9 Lives with Jeff King, Live Your Best One. 9 Lives is a podcast dedicated to helping people build stronger, healthier connections with others through a focus on personal growth, spirituality, and relationship skills. The primary tool for this transformational journey is the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a framework for understanding personality that categorizes human behavior into 9 distinct, interconnected types. You've no doubt heard the term Enneagram on this podcast before. Many of the men I've interviewed know their Enneagram number or type and have found it to be a helpful tool on their spiritual journey, especially in terms of personal understanding and improving relationships. This episode of 9 Lives with Jeff King is titled Return to Presence and involves a conversation I had with Jeff about my own experience living life through the perspective of an Enneagram Type 1, often called the Reformer. This podcast is truly a labor of love, inspired by my own transformative journey and experience at the Men's Rites of Passage and my ongoing commitment to the Illuman community. I hope you'll enjoy the special presentation of Follow Me to the MROP, and that you'll visit Jeff's website at transmuto.org, that's TRANSMUTO.org, to learn about the narrative Enneagram and about my friend Jeff, who's devoted his life to helping others through ministry, counseling, and coaching. My sincere thanks to Jeff for allowing me to share this episode of 9 Lives with Jeff King. Without further ado, let's begin.
Welcome to 9 Lives with Jeff King, the podcast that explores all things Enneagram. Now, here's your host, Jeff King.
Today, as my guest on the episode, is a new friend of mine that we met at a very fascinating festival called the Wild Goose Festival. Brian, thank you so much for being a guest today. Just introduce yourself, tell a little bit about who you are, where you're at, what you do, that sort of thing.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be here. I really appreciate the invitation to have this conversation. As you said, my name's Brian Mueller. I'm from the Southwest Ohio. I grew up in Cincinnati, but now I live in a suburb of Dayton called Centerville. Let's see here. That's just, I don't know even where to begin sometimes, but I do a lot of communications type of work. I'm really privileged at this point in my life to do some work that I really feel has a lot of value. I work within the organization of Illuman, and I work specifically for a client who wrote a book called Choosing Presence, which is about meditation and contemplative prayer. So I work a lot on outreach for that. So that's really my focus at this point in time. I love the Enneagram. The Enneagram has become very significant in my life. In fact, just earlier this year, I was looking for a new spiritual director, and I was asking around to see if I could find somebody that knew the Enneagram, because I thought that would be a valuable tool
Great.
in relationship to the spiritual direction. And I found a woman that did know that, and so it's come into play in spiritual direction as well. But I think it's kind of interesting how I came upon the Enneagram. It's been a little more than 20 years ago. I went to see a counselor, and at that time of my life, I was around 30, and I was, wondering what was next in my life. I wasn't married yet, and I was kind of feeling a little bit stuck. And I always thought it was interesting because as I would talk to her over time, she would give me these little handouts with affirmations and things, and they were just so spot on. They seemed to fit me just right. And in retrospect, a few years later, when I actually learned what the Enneagram was and a little bit more about it, I realized that she had, through conversing with me, had kind of typed me and was giving me helpful clues and affirmations and things that might help me with along my journey. And then, over the course of time, it really is, you have to progress, I think, through the Enneagram to get for it to grow and to become much deeper for you. So eventually I did take a test and figured out my type, and I started going to Enneagram retreats. At this point, I think I've been to 4. But
Wow.
I've mainly been taught by teachers that have been certified at the Enneagram Institute,
Uh,
and I've learned about it through that way. But then this summer, I met you at the Wild Goose Festival, as you said, in North Carolina, and started learning about the narrative Enneagram. And I should have known about the narrative Enneagram because my mom knew about the Enneagram years and years ago, and she
hmm.
followed Helen Palmer.
Oh, cool.
And I understood that Helen Palmer always came to Cincinnati, but that was not my
Mm,
entryway into it. So anyway, I'm now kind of learning about the narrative Enneagram and really benefiting from hearing people tell about their types. It really is giving dimensionality to the types that I
That's
didn't see
great.
before.
That's great. So how close are you to the Institute? Isn't that in Ohio as well?
No, I think that's in New York, somewhere
Is it
in
New
upstate
York?
New
Oh, I
York.
think
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah. I don't know why I was thinking it was in Ohio, but so yeah.
There are some deep Enneagram roots here because Father Richard Rohr, who was in
Hmm.
Cincinnati for years, he taught the Enneagram.
Right.
And yeah, I know that there's a lot of, in Southwest Ohio, there was a lot of people that were familiar with it and teaching it for years.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. So drum roll, what type do you lead with? And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I lead with type one on the Enneagram. And over the years, I've never had any doubt about that. Once I learned about my type and things like that, it just seemed to fit so naturally. It always surprised me for many years why other people might have some confusion about their type. For me, it seemed to be such an easy fit. Not that I
Hmm.
wanted to embrace everything about it, but yeah, the way I kind of approach the world is as a type one. It fits me if you talk about things like being it's very cliche, but to say perfectionist, I think to be a perfectionist in very certain ways is really part of my personality. Being a fixer, uh,
Hmm.
looking to fix things. I have to look at things not always as in a state of of needing repair, needing some sort of attention. Even myself, I think you could get addicted to self help work if you're a one on the Enneagram because you're always trying to fix something. Um, that critic, that inner critic, it's not something that I was aware that other people didn't have so loudly. There's always been that voice in my head that's telling me to do better. You can do better on this. This is driving me forward in ways that sometimes it's just too much. Sometimes it is overwhelming. So I'm constantly trying to silence that voice in my head. And I've learned through some other kind of work that I have a very good two wing. I have that helper type of wing, so
Hmm.
that kind of lends itself well to who I am or how I manifest as a one. Um, Honestly, learning about my codependency through some 12-step work, I really realized that one with a two wing is a very good codependent helper, fixture type of person. So yeah,
Talk a little bit about that in terms of always something to fix. And we can get, I like that term, we get addicted to, to fixing.
to
I'm
fix.
always looking at that. What helps you to kind of hold that tension between addressing what legitimately needs that we want to work on to grow, but then uh, the other side of that, when we become overly fixated on focusing on what needs to be fixed and just always feeling driven with that. How do you work with that tension?
Wow, it's taken a long time. I'm now in my 50s, and I think it's been a journey. Seeing that holy perfection is really
Mm,
important for me as a one, and just realizing that everything is fine just as it is, and it doesn't need my attention or me to fix it. Um, but on the flip side of that too, I do want to embrace that part of myself that can come in and to certain situations, even my work, and really try to improve something or do a good job. I try to honor that aspect of my personality in different projects and things like that. Um, in my career, I spent a lot of time in technology and working on things, and so sometimes it's just helpful for me to pick something up, like a broken computer or something like that, and it's very therapeutic to just kind of fix that. But at the other side of things, it's also very helpful to me to just spend time with people. Community has been really helpful to me in kind of coming to terms with that part of my personality and just seeing the ways that, I am broken myself and other people are, and that we can just come together and kind of be human together. So
mm,
there's a
mm,
great song called, there's a folk musician named Joe Purdy, and he has a song called, I wrote it down, it's called Can't Get It Right Today. And the lyric of the song is just like, hey, I can't get it right today. And it's kind of this surrender, like, I guess I'm just going to give it up. I'm just going to let it go.
mm,
And if I can do that, then I'm usually in a pretty good place. And realizing that, hey, most people are doing their best and so am I. And that's enough. That really
mm,
is enough.
mm. Yeah, I love that. And I think that that idea of for type ones is what is good enough,
Yeah.
and can I live with that? Um, I know for some ones when I bring that up, it's like their lips turn blue just to think about it. It's like, well, it can't just be enough because that feels like I'm letting myself off the hook. I got to get it right, kind of
Right.
thing. Yeah.
I think a lot about the type one on the Enneagram. There's a couple types on the Enneagram that I think are really kind of red hot, and I think it's the one and the eight. And I
Mm,
think that people that are probably close to ones and eight, they can really feel that intensity.
yeah.
I liken it to the sun. I feel like if you go near these people, sometimes, if especially if we're not functioning at a really high level, you might feel burnt. I mean, the eight radiates that heat outwards and generates that heat in the world, and the one has that in such an internal intensity of heat. And if you're close to a one, you're going to feel that. I'm married. I'm on my second marriage,
Okay.
and in and that was really a wonderful thing to happen to me, honestly, is divorce because when that happened more than 10 years ago now, I mean, it was something that I couldn't fix. It was something that I couldn't control, and it was something that I just had to let go. And moving forward, and you have to do some work when you have events like that happen in your life.
Yeah.
You really
It
do
kind of
have to spend
forces
some
it for
time,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, thinking about it. And
Hmm.
so for me, I did realize, man, I am really intense and I can be really, really hard on those people that are close or who I'm intimate with, and that
Yeah.
I need to shut some of that off, at least on the other person for sure, if I can't do it on myself.
Yeah. Well, I like that metaphor of the sun and the heat of how the eights radiate outward, but I do see that one taking it inward, and yeah, it just is constantly churning inside. And I love too this idea of what is mind to fix. And I'm curious for you in your uh, process of growth and exploration and discovery, how do you discern what is yours to fix and what is it for you to let go of? Is there any kind of barometer within you that gives you that indication of you know, how you discern between the two?
Yeah, and it's funny. I want to say when you say what is mine to fix in Illuman, the men's work that I've come upon about 10 plus years ago. Illuman was an organization that was started by Father Richard Rohr, and some of your listeners will know about him.
Hmm.
But it's been very instrumental in my life. And in Illuman, one of the questions that we are constantly posing to men and to ourselves is, what is mine to do?
Yeah.
And then in Al-Anon, I learned the question, or I learned the expression, my own life deserves my attention. And to me,
Mm,
those are very much along similar lines. And so, when I'm in a healthy frame of mind, I'm easily able to kind of discern those things. Is this something that I need to take care of? Is this what really weighs heavily on me? And I wonder, it might be a thing for type ones, is responsibility.
oh, yes.
And so I have to always ask myself, do I need to be taking responsibility for this or for this person? And when it manifests in a codependent way, I really am taking responsibility for other people and their actions in ways that are not healthy. So usually it is a matter of, in order to make healthier decisions in my life and my relationships, you need time, you need space. You can't do everything in such a hurry. The one is, I'm a very instinctual person. Um,
Mhm.
and I trust my instincts. If
Yeah.
you can go to a restaurant with me, it doesn't take me forever to order. You know, I look at the menu and something will hit me right away. And others might really struggle, especially with a long menu, but I trust my instincts and it's
Mhm.
usually been a fine decision for me. But at times I need to bring on board, my head, and really slow down and ask those questions. Not something I like to do, because I like to just move through the world instinctually. But if I can kind of bring along my head and heart in a positive way too, then usually I kind of show up more completely, and I'll be at my best. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's great. Techniques. Hate the word techniques as it feels too arbitrary and manipulative sometimes, but ways that you've discovered that helps you to also release the inner critic so that it's not always kind of chewing on you. What's been helpful there for you?
Ah, you know, I think the one of the most helpful things that I did over the years is I started writing. Really, after my divorce, I would had trouble sleeping. I would wake up in the middle of the night,
Mhm.
and I would start reading different things. But really, what helped me were the mystic poets, people like Rumi and
Mm.
Hafiz, and reading that kind of poetry, and then trying to do that myself. Because over the last 10 plus years, I wrote so much poetry, just getting it out of my head and onto paper. And I it ended up with, oh gosh, I got like 10 self-published books of poetry.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And after getting that, and I haven't written as much lately, and I need to get back to it, although my life in the last year and a half or 2 years has really gotten so busy for me in some ways that it's been difficult for me to find time to do that. But I still think that's a hugely valuable practice.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I look back at I wrote some when I was in college, 30 years ago, and I don't want to dismiss that poetry as irrelevant, but it was so romantic. It was just kind of I didn't feel like I had much to say, but what happens with life and experience and things like that, it enriches everything we do if we bring it to bear on whatever we're doing. And my poetry now is so much deeper. It connects with other people in big ways, and even I got encouraged by men in Illuman a few years ago to lead a writing retreat, developed a writing retreat because some of the men were reading my poems, which for about 5 years, I published on a daily basis. I would publish something called Brian's Poem of the Day.
Hmm.
And that
Wow.
experience too, to watch. So we've been doing this, and I have a partner, Tom, who leads these retreats with me. We do them in Ohio. We had the opportunity to do one in Minnesota this year, and we're going to do one in Chicago next year.
Great.
Yeah, so excited. We bring in different poets that are influenced, but watching other men too find therapy. I mean, it's amazing to me how many people don't think that they have the ability to write or to express themselves creatively that way. And so much comes out. It's just it's been rewarding for me, and I can see it for others as well.
Yeah. I can see that could be almost strategically therapeutic for a type one because you live with that instinct. You're part of the gut center. So how do you access your head? And you talked about, reading and thinking through things, but that poetry really ties into the heart center. But you have that line to four that you can draw from that, that deep field, get into, that authentic expression of what's going on in my internal world. And so I love that. It's kind of funny because part of my type bias, I think, when I first learned about the Enneagram was type ones would be so rigid and bent on the right, wrong, dualistic thinking that I wouldn't think that artistic side of them would be very pleasant because art is not an exact science. But
Yeah.
that line to the one or from the one to the four really draws that out. And actually, my favorite musician songwriter Brandy Carlisle identifies as a type one too. It's like can't
Wow.
get much more artistic and expressive than her lyrics. But
Right.
anyway, so yeah, so I think that's a really unique gift in that one position there.
Yeah, I think it does free you up in a way. I like Brandy Carlisle too. You know, I one of the things that's always kind of baffled me about the Enneagram is why we're not closer to people of our own type, perhaps. And I remember Richard Rohr was doing an Enneagram talk with Russ Hudson one time. I was
Mm-hmm.
listening to that, and I think that's where I heard it. But Richard had said that we don't tend to draw close to people of the same type because we can see each other's bullshit. We can call each other out on that sort of thing. But I will say this, people of the same type as yourself, if you know that, are really good teachers for you. They're really, really
Yeah,
good teachers.
yeah.
I think this is why I've been drawn so much to Richard Rohr and his teachings over the
Mm,
years.
yeah.
And I find him to be so informative. And he's yeah, he's an intellectual. He's written more books. Some people joke that Richard's never had an unpublished thought. But, he's an amazing person, and I
Yeah.
look and just got finished reading, Adam's Return. This is his book about male initiation, and I'd read it years ago, but I continue to participate in these events, as they come up to help other men that are going through that event for the first time. And I was reading and I look at the bibliography and I go, "Oh my god, I can't believe, how many books there are," and I bet Richard has read most of them,
Oh,
you
fun.
know? And I just am not that person to consume that much information. I get overwhelmed by details and all that kind of stuff. And so, for me to bring my head on board, I really just need some time and space.
I was talking to my spiritual director about that, and she was talking about take some breaths and pause, but even gaps in your life, like, yeah, I'm self-employed, and I think a lot of people feel this way is it's if you're self-employed, it's really hard to take a weekend or to be away from your work. I work at home, and certainly during the pandemic, it seemed to get even worse. And being a one, I was with a two wing, I was trying to save the world. I was doing as much as I possibly could in terms of Zoom calls and connections and things. But then I realized, yeah, just space, um, going camping this weekend. That actually is an invitation that comes from a close friend of mine who's a seven on the Enneagram. I draw close to a lot of sevens. I do enjoy their energy and the freedom that they allow themselves to experience life. Um, it's a little overwhelming sometimes, to be with sevens and things like that. But at the same time, that's the kind of freedom that I want. And so, yeah, I mean, I need to cultivate more of
Great.
that, and I'm aware of that. That brings the head on board and gives me space to
Mm,
read, to consider, to be
yeah,
thoughtful.
great. Love it. Talk a bit more about Illuman. Some of my listeners may not be familiar with that group and the movement of that and what its purpose and design is. So tell us a bit more.
Illumin is a community of men, for men, anybody who identifies as man. That has really expanded, I think, in over the years. Richard Rohr, I'm from Cincinnati and I never thought this was significant, but my parents were early followers of Richard and his teachings and became part of that New Jerusalem community that he
Lucky
established.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't,
Yeah.
I honestly, Jeff, I really didn't appreciate that until more recent years of what
Yeah.
that experience was. But it had a huge impact on my life, to even my understanding of religion and faith. I grew up with a very progressive form of Catholicism, which I thought that was more the Catholic Church. I've been it's been a rude awakening in some sense to see what the institutional Catholic Church is more like. But the neighborhood I grew up in, those experiences. So there was a lot of trust in my family and in the community and people I knew in Richard's work, but I wasn't really interested in any kind of church or community for most of my young adult life. But by some chance, I had read Adam's Return, his book about male spirituality and initiation, maybe a year or so before I got divorced, and that kind of planted some seeds. And then I spent some time after my divorce really going deep. And I had this wonderful opportunity where I got to work at Big Bend National Park for a summer. They have a volunteer program in the park where they provide room and board and you work. And I helped to run a visitor center at Big Bend. And during that time, I listened to a lot of Richard's audio recordings from the CAC, the Center for Action and Contemplation, where he founded after he left Cincinnati in New Mexico. And he did a whole series about men and male spirituality, and they really resonated with me. And so when I left Big Bend National Park in 2014, I drove immediately to Illinois, where they were holding a men's rites of passage, and it's a 5-day, 4-night ritual event that leads men through a series of grief and death, and all this is ritual and time in nature, and with the goal of kind of bringing some reflection on your life and that sort of thing. And you will emerge in some sort of transformed way from that. Although you don't necessarily know right away. You do feel immediately different after an experience like a rites of passage, but it takes some time. But immediately after coming back to Ohio, after the men's rites of passage, I immediately began seeking out community and trying to find other men that had gone through that event, other men that were trying to gather men in what we call councils. These are meetings of men just where they come together and they check in. Our councils often have like a meal associated with them, but we also have, a little bit of a program where we try to draw experience and wisdom and things out of the men who are there. So that's been deeply beneficial. And so over the 10 years that I've been involved, Illumin emerged from the CAC. It was originally called MALES, which is an acronym Men as Learners and Elders. And Richard ran that through the CAC for 15 or so years before it became its own organization. And now we're a pretty large organization nationally. There's lots of men's organizations, so I don't want to say that Illumin is the only organization of its type or only community out there that is there for men, but it's a large one. And we have chapters, maybe 15 or so chapters around the country. Vancouver, British Columbia recently became a chapter of Illumin. And we have fraternal organizations because Richard is such a well-known teacher, there's organizations in Australia and Ireland, in the United Kingdom, and Germany and Austria, and even now Latvia. There's an emerging region in
Oh,
Brazil of
great.
men that have seen some benefit in doing rites of passage and things like that. So, yeah, it's just, being connected to others is such an important part of our journeys. I think all of us that's where I do my work. And I would just urge that everybody needs to find some sort of community that which feeds their soul and which they can give themselves to as well.
What have you discovered in terms of the hunger among men to have that kind of community? Reflect a bit on that.
Yeah, this goes so because my family grew up in Cincinnati and part of the New Jerusalem community, I watched that community kind of just flourish and flower in my early childhood. So this is my child perspective on this. I don't know if adult would give you a different kind of perspective, but it was a big concern. It was a big part of our regular lives, and it seemed to be flourishing and drawing a lot of people in, and people were visiting from around the country and around the world to see what was going on. And when Richard kind of hit his midlife, he would go. My understanding is that he takes a hermitage every Lent. He would go away, spend time by himself to reflect. Maybe this is him as a one realizing that he needed some space in which to, kind of integrate things and move
Uh-huh.
forward. And I think my understanding is in 84 or 85, he came back to Cincinnati and said it was time for him to move on. And I don't know that he knew exactly what he was going to do next, but he tried to continue the community with lay leadership. And then he moved on to Albuquerque, and the community sputtered and started to, I don't want to disparage anybody that was part of the community at that time. And of course, that community was affected by developments in the outside world. I think it was born, in a time in the 60s of great change, and there was change in the Catholic Church, and it moved through the 70s and civil rights and those things. And then, the 80s, different things happened and people grew older, and so it fell apart. But what that told me as a young person is that community is hard and it doesn't work. And, the society was kind of buffeting that same, trumpeting that same message to me, like we're all individuals. You know how we get that message as Americans, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We're very individualistic. And so, yeah, I thought that's what you had to do. And then, as my life progressed and I had some difficult experiences in my life, primarily, starting out with divorce, I realized you can't do this alone. You need community. Community is so essential to what we do and who we are as people. And I know that there's this deep, deep hunger for community out there. And I don't want to romanticize community either, because what I learned in my involvement with Illuman is I learned, how difficult it is. There is
Mhm.
we try to maintain Illumin as a very flat organization without much hierarchy. That's really difficult to do. You'll find a lot of men in Illumin that take on positions of leadership. That means running chapters or even serving on the board and those sorts of things that are nines, ones, threes, twos on the Enneagram. You'll have a lot of those types of people. And some of us are looking for hierarchy and control and organization. But at the same time, we're all trying to do our spiritual work and we're aware of these things too. And so, it doesn't mitigate all conflict and things like that, but it's real. It's a real organization where you can do some good work. We really try to put that at the forefront. And, and then too, we all bring the baggage from our life with us, and so that comes to
Mhm.
bear in community as well. But it's
Yeah.
also one of the only places I think you can heal, you know, from these sorts of things, because it's not what I've learned from other teachers is that you're not going to rationalize and think your way through a lot of the traumas and the experiences and the pain in your life. You're going to have some sort of transformative, transcendent experience to forgive, to let go, to be at peace. You'll still have those wounds, but they may not control your life the way that they have in the past.
No doubt you've noticed that the 9 Lives podcast talks a lot about the Enneagram, yet we're mindful that a good number of people have yet to discover the wisdom and power of this dynamic system. We want to help change that. If you'd like to learn more about the Enneagram and how to apply its insights, go to our website, www.transmuto.org, and sign up for our mailing list. Jeff will send you a free information sheet that will help you get started on your exploration of this powerfully accurate tool for personal growth and spiritual development. Plus, you'll receive special offers for other exciting resources to help you start your Enneagram journey. So sign up now at www.transmuto.org.
It is kind of funny. I pastored for a long time, and I think the idea of the church community, a lot of people come into this very idealistic, thinking what it's going to be like, and then they discover what it's actually like. and
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
tough thing about true community, where you rub up against each other and there's friction, and even from an Enneagram perspective, we're all looking for different things, and we think our way is the only way, and then we bump up against people who come at it from a different perspective, and they're thinking the same things about us as we're thinking about them, and it does demand a lot of work to get through that, and to really hammer out true community. And I think while there's a hunger for it for some people, they say, "I'm sorry, it's just too much work. I don't like getting hurt like that, and I'm out." So go off and live isolation, but that doesn't get us anywhere either. So
Yeah, when I was working at the Big Bend National Park, and that's in that area of Texas that where the Rio Grande takes like a 90-degree turn, hence the name Big Bend. But
mm,
it really is off the grid. It's one of the least visited national parks. It's also one of the biggest. It's as big as the state of Rhode Island. It's
holy
very
cow.
hot down there in the summer, but you'll have a lot of people that live out there that are kind of desert rats, I guess, or maybe they call themselves.
Mhm.
But they also call them end of the road people. Is they want to be just on the border of civilization, or have certain things, but they don't want to be messed with. And I'm well aware of that aspect too. There's that aspect in me as well that just wants to withdraw, wants to leave alone. In fact, that might be my nine wing, which I is more of a kind of a shadow thing for me. I don't acknowledge that as much. And just wants to step back and step away. But I told myself that one of the most important things that for me to do is to stay engaged in life and keep connecting. In fact, that's one of the reasons I got married again eventually, is that after 3 years of divorce and spending some time on the road and just doing a lot of work, and I was fortunate to be able to do that. I don't have any children, and didn't have a lot of responsibilities that kept me from taking some of those big steps in my life. But I'd said, I want to be back in relationship, because I learned mainly through Illuman and some of the work I was doing, is that that's what propels us forward, is our relationships with other people, not just necessarily a relationship with a spouse, but just being in community with other people is what's going to continue to drive you forward. And I have to go easy on myself though, because last night we don't even know our neighbors. Our neighbors moved in maybe a year or so ago. There's a house behind us, and I think it might be a rental property. So somebody new came, and they have children and stuff, and they seem like very friendly people, but neither of us have made the overture of, saying, going over to the other house, say hello, this is who I am, that sort of thing. And I don't think it's uncommon even in our suburban neighborhood for that to happen anymore. I think people are just tired. And when they have a house, or a home, it's their refuge from work and the
Yeah,
outside world and things like that. And so it's not like what we might recall from when we grew up, where you knew all the neighbors and everybody was
exactly.
outside all the
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
But I give myself a little bit of a leeway and say, you're doing your best, you'll meet them at some point, or hopefully, maybe something will happen if that's to be, but connection is very, very, very important.
Great. So your role with Illumin, you have some leadership role with them. How does your type one, and maybe you say you're self-employed, so there's kind of self-leadership and doing stuff like that. But how does your type one kind of inform you with leadership, your overall philosophy, principles, how you approach leadership?
Well, with being self-employed and stuff, I think for, and I don't know if this is my type or just, more personality or experience, but or who I am, but I guess I just got tired of being in an office. It seemed like such a waste of time, and I could do more on my own. And I like to do my own thing. I mean, I think that's a real big part of me. And so it's been challenging to be self-employed in a lot of ways, because you have to create your own work. and your own roles and the relationships and things that are you're going to get paid, the projects and things you're going to get paid to do, make a living. Whereas being an employee and things like that, that structure and framework is usually there, but that's not something that I like. And so, being a leader in Illumin has been kind of accidental. I think a lot of the men, we've needed this community in our life. We've needed this connection with other men. We've needed it so much that we just, do what we can to create it. And I am a little critical, probably to a fault, of other men, because there's a lot of men saying, "How do I do this?" or "What do I do?" Because I'm like, I don't know. You just do it. The very you know easiest thing to do is just call together people in what we call a council or a group, and just have a meal, and just try to get together. And that's kind of subtle form of community. But there's no huge structure to this, or you have to be creative. I think you have to be somewhat creative in order to work in community and to be in community. And so that's what we're doing. And I'll tell you, a lot of the guys that find themselves in leadership positions, I think there's a lot of shrugging, like, how did this happen? What am I doing? There's a lot of different types. But I also say too, is this is where you can really manifest your gifts. And this is not based on your Enneagram type at all. It's just some people have a gift for organizing.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have a gift for teaching and leading. I talked about the men's rites of passage. It's a big event to put on. And the men that feel a calling to do that, some of them have gotten into that too, because they want this for their sons and for the other men in their life. And they put in a lot of effort. And when I go to help with one of these events, I tell you, I'm not the one that's organizing this stuff or leading. I'm participating in a supporting role, because that's not a particular gift or charism for me. But what I can do is I can help organize, I can help communicate. One gift that really seems to have happened is that I'm able to help facilitate a writing retreat, because it's something I do. And so, yeah, that's my message to others, is just do what you can and
Mm-hmm.
trust that that'll be enough.
Yeah, that's great. So, how if somebody was interested in participating in an Illumin Rites of Passage weekend, where would they go? What would they do to plug in?
I think it's rare that men will just show up to a rites of passage. It does happen, or that they might be ready for it, or they might have other men in their life who've gone through it and they can trust it. That'll point them in that direction. But for somebody who is totally new to this, I would say there's a couple pathways. One, pick up Richard's book, Adam's Return, and read about what the men's rites of passage is about. Learn about that. Um, and there are other organizations that do men's rites of passage, but Illumin primarily works with men in the middle passage of life. And that's not to say that you haven't been initiated by other things that have happened in your life, but that is that, we don't do youth rites generally in our culture anymore. There are
Mm-hmm.
youth rites out there, but we don't do that. And so we initiate men into what we call the second half of life. Another good book by Richard is called Falling Upward, which talks about that transition to the second half of life. The other things I would say is, if you live in a region that is served by a chapter, look to connect with those men in your region. If you're not, for instance, Jeff, you're in Kansas, as I
Right.
understand,
Mm-hmm.
there's not as much organization within Illumin in that part of the country, but there are virtual councils. So if you go to the illumin.org website and you look up virtual councils, there's ways to participate online in our council events. And usually there's 2 or 3 a week, on both East Coast and West Coast times, to kind of
Mm-hmm.
facilitate that for
Cool.
men. And by doing that, you'll get a little bit of familiarity with the organization. And maybe at some point you will want to participate in a men's rites of passage. But I will say too, it's not a requirement, for your participation
Mm.
in
Okay.
Illumin. We have, quite a few men that have not gone to these events and probably never will,
Mm.
but we welcome them as part of our community.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. We did a men's rites of passage. I don't know if uh, our organization that did it was directly tied to Illumin or not, but it came out of that pattern. From the guy that really spearheaded it, had gone to one of the Illumin experiences, I think in Colorado, and brought it back to Kansas, and we had a great event, and we're in the plans for the second one, and then COVID hit and
Mm,
brought
yeah.
gatherings like that to a screeching halt.
Mhm.
So, and we just never, no one's had the energy, I don't think, to pick it up and go with it yet. So, but that's interesting. I didn't know people could just plug in even if they hadn't been through the rites of passage experience. So.
Oh yeah, and there's
Good.
like we do the writing retreat,
Hmm.
we'll do Enneagram retreats. There's all kinds of things. Wanderings is one of the things that's really popular where we'll meet at a park and we'll get together and we'll have set an intention, read a poem, something like that, and the guys will go out for
Hmm.
3 or 4 hours, and then we'll come back together and have
Oh,
kind of a
cool.
picnic lunch. Guys love that because actually the more time you can spend outdoors, it seems
Hmm.
like that draws a lot of people to our events. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. I don't know if we talked about this when we were together this summer at the Goose, but my dear friend who's worked with Richard with Illuman has kind of taken that model and has developed an elders rites of passage. And we do for like 55 and up, but we do for both male and female in the elders rites. But it's a similar format, but it's specifically talking about how do we become elders in the true sense of the word. And it's just, yeah, been very transformative. We've done 2 cycles of that, planning for our third now.
Yeah, the elder rights has been a huge thing within Illumin and elsewhere. I know that that's usually for men over age 65 and up. My father, who, believe it or not, my father was a Catholic priest. He had gone
Oh,
in.
really?
He grew up in Chicago, and
Mm.
he entered the Passionists. This is back in the 50s. At age 14, so he started really early and was ordained for just a few years before he left the priesthood, but and
Mm.
got married, and that was common, I think, in the Vatican two times. But he was the guy that he and my mom both, but he also was an early follower of Richard. And when he saw me get involved with Illumin, I think he was always curious. And after a couple years of my involvement, he started coming to our national gathering, which used to be called Solarize. Now it's called Awaken. And we would get together outside of Albuquerque every year. And this year it's in southern Illinois, just northeast of St. Louis, in a place called Carlinville, Illinois. And so it's moving around the country a little bit to incorporate more men. But my dad would come to that. And then I think in 2018, he said, I'm ready to do a rites of passage. Well, that was the first year that they held an elder rites of passage up in
Cool.
Washington. And he participated, and it was utterly transformative in his life. In fact, he came home and he immediately changed his burial plans. I think he just had a traditional plan for his funeral and cremation and things like that. But he decided on natural burial. And as luck would have it, my dad died in 2023, in the summer of 2023, and really unexpectedly, sort of sudden, had a cardiac event and died. And within 3 or 4 days, we had him in the ground in a wooden box in a green burial, special section. A lot of
Oh,
cemeteries are
wow.
offering that
Hmm.
now, and it was a really beautiful, small ceremony because of the sort of the urgency of having to
Yeah.
bury an unembalmed corpse. But then we had a larger memorial 2 months later, and it was really profound. And so my dad's been gone a little bit more than a year now, and it's really the men's work that he was involved in. There were a lot of men from Illumin that had come to his memorial, which was deeply touching. People that knew him and knew me
Wonderful.
and were
Yeah.
supportive. But yeah, it's caused me to consider my own relationship with him. My dad was a 9 on the Enneagram, and he was that parent for the some of the literature where you read is that one's felt alienated from one of their parents, and for me, that would have been my father.
Mm.
He was really, when I would upset him and things like that, he would really withdraw from me. I don't felt like he never loved me or cared for me or things like that, but it was really hard for him to engage with me when he was displeased. And I remember my sister on his birthday this last year saying to me, I really miss dad. I really miss dad. And I go, I couldn't relate to that because that voice in my head, that voice of the inner critic is my dad. That's my
Hmm.
dad's voice. And it's feel like I've never been without him, even after he's passed away in some sense.
Wow.
And I know that he had that voice in his head as well. But it was a real gift for me in the last, I'd say, 7, 8 years of his life to do the men's work with him, because
Hmm.
one big dimension of our men's work is dealing with our relationships with our father and trying to understand that, and also for the
Hmm.
men that have sons to deal with their relationships as fathers to their boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Beautiful. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, Brian, what currently are you reading that's inspiring you, or any other practice that you're finding inspiring at this moment?
Well, I mentioned at the top that I work for a man named Jim Heaney, who wrote a book called
Hmm.
Choosing Presence. Jim Heaney lives in Southern California, and he's an elder in Illuman, SoCal. And, I met him and one of the Illuman weavers, and weavers in Illuman are the men that lead the men's rites of passage. Richard Rohr was the original weaver for Illuman, but these are men that were selected originally by Richard to lead more rites of passage. And Jim Taylor is the weaver. So Jim Taylor and Jim Heaney, who wrote Choosing Presence, came to me a couple years ago and says, "Can you help us build a website for Choosing Presence?" And I said, "Sure." Well, I didn't know that saying yes to that was going to get me deeply, deeply involved in figuring out what choosing presence is and what that means. So, Choosing Presence is a book about the practice of presence. And Jim Heaney went through the rites back in '97 when Richard first started offering them at Ghost Ranch in New Mexico, and he was profoundly affected by that experience. And at that time, he would have been a man in his 50s. And he struggled with meditation and contemplative prayer, those sorts of things. And he really struggled with that for years and years. And he sought out teachers like Richard and Thomas Merton. And I think he was deeply influenced by the work of Brother Lawrence, who was a 17th century Carmelite monk who talked about how you can be in the presence of God no matter what you're doing. Whether you're in the kitchen cooking or you're out in the fields working, whatever, you can always be in the presence of God. So he started working on his own practice of meditation, and he started teaching that in prisons. And I think he got directed to write a book. So he wrote a book called Choosing Presence, and that was published in 2020. And Jim's a 3 on the Enneagram. And, he was a businessman in life, very successful. And Choosing Presence is kind of like his post-career gift to both himself and to other people. He preaches practicing presence, choosing presence. And Jim had a couple of real key insights around meditation and contemplative prayer. I started meditating after yoga, taking yoga. My sister became a yoga teacher after she got out of college, and I would take her yoga class and she would talk about meditation. And so I had always kind of had this idea in my mind that meditation was this Eastern practice and that it was somehow associated with fitness, and it was a mindfulness practice, clearing your mind, taking a moment to breathe, getting some space. It was always a morning practice too. You would sit in the morning. But Jim grounded that practice of meditation and breath and contemplative prayer in the Christian tradition, said, "Hey, this is a Western tradition as well." And he brought it for me out of the head into the heart and saying it's a heart practice as well. It's not just about mindfulness and clearing your head. It's about, and I would say it's the mystical or incarnational heart that we're trying to move into, where we really are trying to connect with whatever we consider God, or our understanding of God in the present moment. And the last thing is he said that presence is something that you can come back to throughout the day. It's not something you just do in the morning. It's something that you can check in on an hourly basis, or you can do it whenever you get the sense that, hey, wait a second, I'm losing contact, or I'm getting angry, whatever. Take some breaths, do a check-in, and return to presence. So right now I'm reading, long answer of, I'm reading Choosing Presence, which is a small book again about the practice of presence, but I'm doing this in a workshop setting. Every fall, we invite men to register for this. We give them the book of Choosing Presence, and we work through the chapters together. And I've probably, now read the book about 7 or 8 times, and it's not a long read or difficult read, but it goes deeper and deeper every time. And by experiencing it in community, that's, that's enriching the experience for all of us, and hopefully expanding what it means to meditate, what it means to pray contemplatively, what it means to be mindful and take those breaths in our culture. Hopefully people
Powerful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well,
I'm
I
reading
could,
some Rumi too. We're doing our writing retreat next year is going to be, Rumi is going to be our inspiration.
oh,
So
great.
I picked up a lot of Rumi here to kind of, reacquaint myself with some.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I can imagine, so Jim identifies as a type 3. I could see where meditation could be a bit of a challenge as a type 3. So that's kind of interesting that it almost seems like counterintuitive. That'd be his like special gift to the world, is the teaching how to be present. So for you as a type 1, what do you find any kind of type 1 challenges for being present for yourself?
Well, I think when it comes to any kind of practice for a type 1, you want to make sure you're getting it right, or
Getting it
you're
right.
doing it. Yeah. And so getting past that hurdle is probably the biggest thing. And, Jim is, when Jim talks about present, he's very adamant that, hey, you need to work your way up to 20 minutes every morning of doing this. And he also created a mobile app that will put hourly reminders on your phone so that you can do those check-ins and things like that.
Cool.
And it's a neat thing. It's a free app that goes with it, and it's helpful. But that's very for a one that can feel very rigid and structured and things like that. And so
I'll
I have
get
to get
another, yeah, another thing to get right. Better make sure
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
miss that alert. Yeah.
Yeah, so to
Mm.
me, it's about, and to me, it's, I have no qualm with the idea that we need to do, you come to a point in your life where you go, this is just essential. It's what I do. It's
Mhm.
like getting up in the morning, and I usually start off my morning with some stretching, and I wish I could stop doing it. But at my age and with some of the injuries and things I've had, I have no choice, if I
Stretching's
want to.
important. It gets more important as you get older too, I'll tell you.
Yeah. But that's the same thing with doing some sort of prayer and meditation
Mhm.
and on a daily basis and throughout the day. I just think it's essential because
Yeah.
life doesn't get easier, but hopefully, if you're on a spiritual path, the tools and the things that you have, the resources, even the community that you have to support you, that grows, and so you're
Mhm.
able to take on bigger things and deal with bigger challenges.
Great. So,
Yeah.
well, very good. Well, Brian, this has been a great conversation. I'd love just to keep on going, but I'm sure you have other things you got to get to today too. But thanks so much for hopping on the show and spending time with me and talking about this stuff. Where can people find you, especially if they're interested, like in the writing retreat? Give some contact. Make sure we get those in the program notes too.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. For Illuman, again, go to illuman.org. That's our national website where I'm at in Ohio. And we work closely with our chapters in Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, and Minnesota. We call ourselves Illuman Great Lakes, but our chapter website is ohioilluman.org. And you can always contact me at connect. My email is connect@ohioilluman.org. I love the idea of helping people to connect with the community and with resources available. Choosing Presence is where I do a lot of my work these days. Go to choosingpresence.org. You'll find out a lot about us. We do a weekly email right now where we talk about topics associated with the practice of presence. For those that are wanting to go deeper with this, that might be beneficial. I have a website where my poetry is. It's
Oh,
brianmueller.com.
cool.
You can actually see that as well. And if I may,
Nice.
there's fun things. I had written down a couple things. One of the things I always loved about Enneagram retreats is we had certain teachers that would mention movies or characters or songs and stuff that identify with the type. And one of the ones that is so informative to me, the movie The Bridge on the River Kwai, which came out in 1957. I don't think
Yeah.
you remember that. It was based on a book, a really popular book, but it was Alec Guinness, excuse me, the guy that played Ben Kenobi in Star Wars. He was the lead actor in that, and he plays a British colonel named Colonel Nicholson. And the movie there's a lot more to it, but in that movie, there's a whole brigade of English soldiers that are in a Burmese prison camp. And they're asked by their enemy to build a bridge for a railway in and he instructs his men, they're an engineering brigade. So they build this bridge, and they're not doing a good job. And when he finds out they're not doing a good job, he's so upset. And he says, you got to do the best job you can. You guys are British soldiers. This is what we do. And he makes them build this wonderful bridge for the enemy or for the Burmese army going across. And then at the end of the movie, he kind of realizes, oh my God, what have I done? And I wonder if, I don't know that he's an Enneagram type one, but that seems like such an Enneagram type one thing is you just kind of lose sight of everything. And you say, this is what I do, and this is what I do well. And you don't have any larger context. I think that's what it means to be doing things instinctually, but not bringing your head online. So if anybody wants to see
Fascinating.
a one character in action, I think that might be a movie.
Mhm.
And there's a great song too by this group called Ages and Ages. The name of the song is Divisionary, but everybody knows it by its lyric. It's called Do the Right Thing. And that
Mm-hmm.
song is the voice of the inner critic for the one. But
Yep.
it's a really great song because it's sung in chorus. And if you look up the video, uh, watch the live video where they have all these people singing the song together. It's called Do the Right Thing by Ages and Ages. And it's a fun song. But that's it's that voice in your head is constantly saying, do the right thing, do the
Yeah.
right thing, do the
Yeah.
right thing. So yeah, thanks for letting me
Good.
mention this because I thought
Yeah.
about that because when you did the one panel, there was a gentleman named Steve on there, and he mentioned a
Yeah.
couple of books
Mhm.
that he found were helpful, and I've been looking into those books as well.
Good, good. Well, I'll pass that along to him. He actually just lives about 3 blocks from my house here. So we get together quite often. I'll have to mention to him Ages to Ages and that movie as well. So
Yeah,
that's good.
thank you so much, Jeff. What you guys do with the narrative enneagram is really helpful because it does. it's easy to kind of see the types in the context of who we are and in a very narrow space. But by having people share stories and do
Yeah.
panels and things, it really gives dimensionality to each of the types. And yeah,
Oh,
people.
great. Well, thank you for contributing to the conversation. This has been wonderful. So,
Oh, I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
well, I think you'll agree with me that Brian gives us a great insight to the Type 1 structure and what it looks like for someone who leads with Type 1 when they do their work and really push through to grow and develop and mature beyond some of the restrictions and rigidity that Type 1 can bring to us. So again, thanks, Brian, for giving us a great insight and for being my guest on the podcast. And be sure to check out his information in the program notes. And if you'd like to learn more about the Enneagram and how to apply its wisdom to your life, I'd love to be a companion with you on that journey. I provide a variety of services, including typing interviews that help you identify which Enneagram type you lead with, as well as follow-up coaching and consulting to help you apply the wisdom of the Enneagram to whatever area of life that you would like to work on, whether that's your own personal growth and development, in your key relationships, or in your professional life. I also provide a variety of workshops and trainings for organizations to help develop better staff relations as well as workplace culture. So check me out. Find me at my website at transmuto.org. You can also follow me on my Facebook page at Transmuto or on my Instagram account, TransmutoKC. So thanks again for tuning into this episode of 9 Lives. Be sure to check out our next episode. And until then, live your best life.